very good evening to you. Welcome to another News Maker Live broadcast right here on DBS Television. My name is Timothy Poole, and we go up until 10 o'clock, at which time we'll be concluding with the clip that peaked. Well, between over the weekend and now, we've been having so many incidents occurring of a criminal nature. For example, in the wee hours of Saturday, the island recorded 2 homicides, bringing to 37 the number of killings so far for 2017. And yesterday, we had a brazen act occurring at Riverside Road, where an individual attempted to, well, fire upon the police, and the police returned fire. And that person the civilian is reportedly out there on the lam and is being pursued by the police. Since then, we've heard from the island's police commissioner sending out a strong signal to those criminal elements, saying that he will not sit idly by and allow them to attack his officers. So definitely, crime is an issue that is preoccupying our attention in St. Lucia this time. I think it's relevant that we have someone on the broadcast to focus on the scourge. My guest, Police Superintendent Mr. George Nicholas. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Tim.
What's it like for someone to be a police officer right now in St. Lucia, and especially to be operating within the crime unit of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force? All things considered, 37 homicides already for this year.
Well, it could be. Well, let me say good evening to your team and good evening to your viewers. And thank you for the opportunity for being on the program. But first of all, police officers are human beings just like everybody else. And we are subject to the same issues of society. Life as a police officer could be scary at times, especially these days. It could be exciting. Sometimes you leave home and you're not sure whether you're coming back, you know. But you just have to be committed to the task, and it's something that, you know, it's a job that has to be done and somebody has to do it. And I applaud the men and women who put their lives on the line every day, going out there to try and keep St. Lucia as safe as possible.
But the uncertainty must be very scary. The uncertainty of, for example, not returning home to your family. How do the families accept that?
Well, I'm not sure it's something that they can accept, and that is not only peculiar to police officers. I mean, anybody else is subject to that, I'm afraid to say. But, you know, you do what you have to do. You focus on the job, you pray, you believe in God, and you hope that, you know, you can return home safely.
What's the morale of police officers in St. Lucia like right now? Because you guys come under immense criticism. Of course, when I say you guys, I'm referring there to the female police officers as well. Mm-hmm. Immense criticism from sections of the public, and we no doubt expect that they will be calling on the Royal St. Lucia Police Force to provide them with a service that is exceptional. Mm-hmm. And we all know that members of the society see themselves as consumers, mm-hmm. and therefore they would also want to ensure that whatever service that is being provided to them, in this case by the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, will be of a high quality. How do you deal with the criticism coming from members of the public?
Well, it is something that we face on a daily basis, and I know it comes with the territory. But you just have to keep improving on the service that you deliver on a day-to-day basis. You know, at times when you will fall short, and when you fall short, you know, you pick up, you dust yourself off, and you try to be better than you did yesterday. Every day you come to work, you try to improve, try to make your contribution in a meaningful way that you can be satisfied at the end of the day that you've done your job.
But who assesses the performance of the police? Who determines that the police officers in St. Lucia are giving their best to the St. Lucian public? How do you make that assessment?
I suppose the members of the public themselves can be a very good judge of our performance. When we have our annual end of year report or what have you, you can see the successes that have been made over the year, and the solve rate for crimes especially. And these can be yardsticks to use to measure the success of the police.
What's the solve rate for the police in terms of solving crimes?
Generally, it's about 35–40%, but it would vary based on the category of crime.
Let us look at, for example, the homicide rate. Because when we're talking about crime is on the increase and crime is of concern to the St. Lucian public, most people are primarily concerned about homicides.
We have been doing very well in terms of solving the homicides over the years. This year, for example, we've had 47, and we have solved 22 of them, and that's a very high percentage. So over the years, we've been doing well in terms of the homicide solve rate.
The detection rate and so on.
Detection rate, yeah.
Earlier on, you said that members of the St. Lucian public normally would make that determination with regard to the performance of the police. But do you think that they are always in a position to make a fair assessment? Because I get the impression that there are a lot of things that the police would not be able to share, information would be able to share with the public. For example, earlier this week, a forensic scientist, Mr. Louis Murray, was asking, and he was saying he doubts whether the police, whether they have some crime strategy or an action plan. Now, you as a police officer, would you be tonight be in a position as a police superintendent to tell us exactly what the strategy is, what the action plan is of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force? Would you be in a position to do that?
I'm in a position to tell you, yes, we have a strategy, but not to go into details as to what the strategy is. Because any activity we undertake get towards fighting crime is a strategy by itself. But there are those that, because of the sensitive nature of those activities, and then you cannot say what your strategy is because would-be criminals would know what it is beforehand and then, do things to counteract it. So, based on the situation, you would implement the strategy that you feel is more applicable in the circumstance.
But do you think that is the dilemma that you as police officers face? Because you're not in a position to say that, for example, we have certain challenges. For example, we have limited resources in that particular area, so that you could take members of the public in your confidence. For example, the number of vehicles that you have. So that is the dilemma you're saying that you face as a police officer. Because people would judge you purely on whatever information that is at their disposal.
Yeah. We are faced with several constraints, but in spite of that, we yield quite a number of successes in various areas. And probably our PR is too poor that we don't disseminate the information that we can disseminate so that members of the public can know exactly what is happening within the Royal St. Lucia Police Force.
But what do you think is what you'd say to the St. Lucian public that is not being reported?
We have a lot of operations that are ongoing. We have a lot of activities in terms of community policing and other community initiatives that we undertake. And all of these are not being reported, I suppose, because, like I said, they are poor PR system.
Now, in terms of your crime strategy and the action plan, can you say confidently to the St. Lucian public right now, our viewers, that whatever strategy that you have or whatever action plan, those are effective? Because I'm sure that, again, the viewers will say that is not true based on the statistics, based on what is happening, based on the fact that it appears that criminals are taking the fight directly to the police instead of it being the reverse.
You see, when people speak of a strategy, they probably want to see a blueprint. And you see, once you implement this, then it's going to take care of crime, it's going to solve crime. But that's not how it works. You have different activities that you would implement in different situations. And I would say, yes, it's working, because if you look at the homicides for this year, for example, we've had 47, and we've had 22 of them solved. Our strategies perhaps are too reactive, whereby we respond to an incident after it has happened. we would want to have more strategies geared towards tackling crime from the front end, even before it happens. And this calls for us to be able to improve on our intelligence gathering capacity. And in that regard, the members of the public can assist in providing us with information that we can operationalize to tackle crime from the front end. So the strategies are working, but strategy is not something that remains constant because the dynamics of crimes change on a daily basis. So you have to change the strategy as you see fit, as you go along.
But the fact that 15 homicides have not been solved for this year out of the 37, that's a significant number.
It is a significant number. One homicide to me is a significant number. We would prefer it to remain as 0. But to have solved 22 out of 37, while it is good, it is not good enough. And we are working towards solving the remaining 15. We would hope that the number would remain at 47 for the year and to reduce next year. But we cannot do it alone. We need the assistance of the members of the general public.
One gets the impression that police officers, or generally speaking, the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, in the event that a crime is not solved and sufficient time would elapse, let's say 4 or 5 years, that crime is forgotten in terms of the efforts of the police to solve it, because you do not receive updates from the police and you're not informed. I don't know if the relatives or the family members of the victim would be informed of efforts that are being made to solve that crime, because there are several cases over the last few decades, Mary Ratcliffe, etc. Those crimes have not been solved. And you get the impression that they're as dead as the victims.
I wouldn't say so, Tim. I know we've been lacking in terms of keeping victims abreast with the stage of their particular case or investigations. I know that it's an area where we have to improve upon. Given our limited resources, we focus on the cases where we can, or where, for want of a better term, where there's light at the end of the tunnel, where there's a semblance of evidence that we'll be able to solve this case. We focus more on those cases as opposed to those that are so-called dead end. But it's not that they have been forgotten. Once new information comes in, we focus our attention to those cases as well.
But police officers diligently going out there, pursuing those cases, trying to get new leads?
Absolutely, because that is why we're able to solve 22 out of the 37 cases. And we also, investigations are still ongoing on matters that came up last year, matters from last year. So there are times when these cases are solved, and it will not be factored into the 22 that I mentioned earlier. The
22 cases that were solved, on what basis were they solved? Do you think it's purely on the work of the police, on intelligence, cooperation of members of the public?
It's a combination of various factors, those you mentioned, Tim, and but more on the efforts of members of the public collaborating with the police to help in solving those crimes. And we want to encourage that as much as possible. And we want to say kudos to those persons who assist the police in providing information that leads towards solving those crimes.
There's a problem when it comes to members of the public trusting the police. Is that improving at all? Or is a situation where the problem still continues to dog the Royal St. Lucia Police Force?
It is a matter that we're still grappling with, but we are making strides in that regard. We have several initiatives that seek to bring the police closer to members of the public, and it is improving.
But there are instances where, for example, and if you listen to the talk shows, people are saying that they just do not trust the police for one reason or the other. Take, for example, the actions of a rogue cop would serve as a deterrent to somebody who wants to cooperate with the police and provide them with any kind of information that would lead to a crime being solved. Do you get that impression?
We do, but that is where our PR should come in, and to try and reassure persons that the action of one police officer is not peculiar to the entire force. And But you know, Tim, we are one organization who have a disciplinary system that discipline the members once they transgress the law. And it's a system that is working, and a system where we encourage persons to participate in.
So that's the police complaint body?
The police complaint unit.
Mm-hmm. But we've also heard of people saying that they're given the runaround when they want to lodge a complaint with that particular entity, because it does not basically have the authority to itself discipline the police officers that are under investigation. What's the process? How, if you have a complaint against the police, what's the process? How do you go forward with it?
Well, you visit the police complaint unit and you lodge a complaint, your report is entered, and then it is being investigated. But there's limitation with the legislation, because take, for example, there's no compensation that can be awarded to the victim of a matter, somebody who reports a matter to the complaints unit. So there are limitations with the legislation. It is just to provide some measure of discipline to the officer, and it ranges from 1 day's pay to 10 days pay, or you can be dismissed from the organization. These are some of the penalties that
I just find it very interesting that somebody would have a complaint pertaining to a particular police officer. Somebody would claim that that police officer has assaulted them. The person would provide supposed evidence, bruises, cuts, and so on. And then that individual would be advised to take their concerns to the police complaint unit, as opposed to a police officer investigating and, if necessary, arresting that police officer and charging him.
No, the option would be available to the victim, whereby you can either take the matter criminally or go to the police.
Take it up criminally in what way? Because you reported to the police, and you're lodging a complaint to the police.
Yeah, so that matter can be investigated either criminally or disciplinarily. So the police officer can be arrested and charged and taken before the court, or it can be dealt with internally. And we've had several instances where police officers have been arrested and taken before the court.
But do you find in such circumstances, I think what I'm saying is that very often the impression has been given that officers who are taking those complaints normally refer the victims to the police complaint unit.
Well, once a matter is being reported against a police officer, it is being reported at the police complaint unit. But it can be, once reported there, it can be investigated criminally, or it can be investigated with a view to taking disciplinary action against a police officer from within the organization itself.
What do you have to say to people who say that they do not trust the police to provide them information for fear that their identity will be revealed? Are there other methods that those people can employ, can use to assist the police in investigating a crime, a murder, anything of that nature?
What police officers have to understand that what is more important is the message and not the messenger. So the information the person is providing should be of utmost importance. Number one priority. The identity of the person is secondary. There are instances where you don't need the identity of the person. But there are instances where, without any other evidence, you require the person to come and testify. But in a lot of cases, once you have that information, you can work with it and acquire other evidence that would not necessarily need that person to come forward.
Criminals in the St. Lucian society, have we reached a stage where they are not afraid of the police?
Given the circumstances under which some crimes have been committed, one can get that impression. But it provides also an opportunity for us as police officers. If people are becoming more daring or becoming more emboldened, it provides us an opportunity to solve more cases, to apprehend them, to catch them in the act. So it can work to our advantage.
I'm saying that against, I asked the question against the background of what occurred yesterday at Riverside Road. A plainclothes police officer identified himself as an officer of the law, as a police officer, and yet still the supposed criminal element still fired at the police. Well, we're not living in normal times, so, but I'm saying under normal circumstances, this individual would beat a hasty retreat as opposed to taking on the police. He's showing that he basically is not afraid of the police.
Well, I think the police officer did the right thing, because you ought to identify yourself. But you see, it all depends on the circumstances too, under which you are acting. But to have engaged the police, obviously shows some degree or the absence of fear. But I must say kudos to the police officer who was brave enough to engage this individual. And you know, we are thankful that nobody got hurt during the incident, and it's a matter that we are pursuing with a view to apprehending this individual.
What do you think is the message that's being sent to other criminal elements in St. Lucia?
Well, a positive message can be sent in the sense that the fact that the officer was brave enough to engage this individual can send a very positive message that we, the police, will stand up to whatever resistance that we may encounter when it comes to fighting crime.
But for some other people, it could be that it is worth taking on the police because you stand a good chance of not being shot and injured, or worst case scenario of being shot and killed.
I'm not sure that would necessarily be the message. The guy can be considered lucky that he got away scot-free.
Do you think that police officers are inhibited and impeded somewhat by what is hanging over their heads right now? And that is the allegations of alleged extrajudicial killings and the investigation that is still underway, that is still pending, still before the Director of Public Prosecution, and the United States and the EU are certainly calling for some kind of conclusion to this issue. Do you think that this is certainly serving as a major deterrent in police officers going all out to fight crime in St. Lucia?
Obviously, when you have something that looming over your head and not sure of the outcome, it is going to cause some concern, but I will not say that it will deter us from pursuing our you know, job in terms of fighting crime. Since that impact, police officers continue to work diligently. Only earlier this year, we have police officers who, through their hard work, earned regional awards, and we had first runner-up or second runner-up in crime fighting, a regional award won by a police officer from St. Lucia. So we continue to work hard despite this impacts issue. It is something that we would want to see resolved within the shortest space of time, and I know some work is being done in that regard, but we continue to do what we have to do.
But considering that the incidents occurred between 2010 and 2011, you're talking about 7 years now. Do you think that the process has taken much too long in terms of resolving? And we're already the 9th month of this year. One does not get the impression that it will be resolved anytime soon.
Justice in this country is a bit slow, Tim, and you would know that. I think it's public knowledge. But there are certain strides that are being made in that regard. I know now we have some more judges being employed to hear criminal matters. We have, excuse me, the DPP, Deputy DPP. So efforts have been made to resolve this impacts issue, and I know that the DPP is working assiduously to get it resolved. So we are hoping and praying that within the shortest possible time, it will be resolved to return some normalcy to the organization.
We know that police officers are continuing to go to work and to work under very stressful conditions and without having a clear mind. And with this hanging over their head, I'm sure that they're thinking that there could be any possible outcome. It could be an outcome that will determine the guilt or the innocence, but not automatically the innocence.
Like I said, it is something that is causing some concern, but in spite of that, we continue to work and to provide the service to the general public that we've been paid to provide.
But do you think police are fearful that what if, in the process of executing my duties, I shoot and kill this guy? We'll be hearing from yet another human rights activist in St. Lucia, and certainly that would raise eyebrows in the European Union as well as in the United States. Don't you think that's what is happening?
In the course of fighting crime worldwide team, there are instances when police officers will find themselves in situations that result in fatalities. At the end of the day, once you're able to justify your action, I don't think you should have any fear of taking action, because the bottom line is you have to be able to justify your action.
So do you think that those police officers who are the subject of that probe, they feel justified, based on what you know?
Based on what I know, yes.
How soon would you want this to be addressed? Would you want this whole impacts matter to be settled at least by a certain time frame? What, to your mind, would be a reasonable period to resolve this issue?
I can't put a time frame to it, Tim, to say I want it done by tomorrow. I would have preferred if it was done already. But like I said, I know that work is being done in that regard. And I would just allow that, you know, due diligence to prevail and to allow the process to go on.
But despite this lingering issue, you as a senior police officer, what is your message to criminals in St. Lucia, especially those who want to take on the police, as was the case yesterday?
Well, we will not back down to any criminal elements, the handful of criminal elements in St. Lucia. We have the will, we have the know-how to deal with it, but we want the support of the general public in order for us to deal with this whole crime issue. But we're not going to lie down or stand idly by and allow any criminal elements to take over St. Lucia, take over the streets of St. Lucia, no.
You're watching Newsmaker Live right here on DBS Television, and my guest is Police Superintendent Mr. George Nicholas. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion, and of course later we'll take your calls. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching Newsmaker Live right here on DBS Television with me, Timothy Polio, and my guest, Police Superintendent Mr. George Nicholas, as we continue to focus on the crime situation in St. Lucia. Later, we'll be taking your calls, so please stand by for that, and we conclude with the clip that peaked. Why do we have so many illegal firearms in the hands of criminals in St. Lucia?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Tim. You would know that our borders are very porous, and any point can be a point of entry, and you know, people have access to the porous borders. Hopefully, when the border control comes into fruition, we'll be able to better manage our borders. But even outside of that, internally, I think customs probably can play a better hand in preventing some of those illicit guns from coming in, because I'm sure some do come in through our legal borders, especially around Christmas time, when you have a proliferation of barrels coming in, and the few custom officers who work at the ports cannot physically check all those barrels. So some would slip through the cracks, and I'm sure from time to time you may find firearms coming in there.
Have you discovered any instances where firearms have come in through those barrels?
We have heard of instances, because obviously if we know that they're coming in, we'll take the necessary measures to apprehend those persons and to seize the weapons. But we have heard of instances where they do come in through the legal methods.
But also with regard to the gun situation, and we continue to hear about our borders being porous. I think by now people are very familiar with the definition for that word porous, because they hear it so often from the police and from the politicians. But shouldn't we be doing something about that problem, the porous borders?
Well,
don't we have a Marine unit of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force?
Well, we do have a Marine unit, but it's still, the assets of the Marine unit is still limited, and they will not be able to properly police the entire coastline of St. Lucia. And that is why I think the border control would be a very good control mechanism, so to speak, where you have the Marine unit, the immigration, the SLASPA, customs coming in under one umbrella. So you'll have all these resources coming under one umbrella. And I think by virtue of that, we'll be able to better patrol our borders and better keep it safe. But
why should that make a difference? Why can't we make a difference now, even if they're operating as separate entities? Doesn't SLASPA, the police unit of SLASPA, has a particular responsibility? The Marine unit, also customs, and the police, even as separate entities, don't you think that you should be able to achieve a goal that is preventing those criminal elements from bringing those illegal guns through our borders?
Once you have those different agencies, Tim, operating under their own accord, you would find either duplicity, a duplication of work, or no coordination among the different agencies. So if you have all of them under one umbrella, I think it would make better sense, and where you have a wider pool of resources at your disposal to better deploy to be able to achieve your objective.
Operating under one umbrella, do you think it should entail additional resources? I haven't heard that the Prime Minister revealing or indicating whether there will be additional resources being provided to that particular entity or unit.
I suppose once they have come, once that unit is fully operational and all the resources come together, I suppose once they realize, well, there's need for extra resources, I suppose efforts will be made in that regard to get whatever extra resources that is required.
Once the guns enter our shores through those porous borders and they are in St. Lucia, what can the police do to ensure that they do not remain in the hands of criminals?
Well, we off and on conduct operations geared towards retrieving those guns, but we cannot do it alone. We need the support of the general public who I must say have been assisting very much in that regard. We want to continue soliciting their support to provide enough information that would lead towards recovering those guns. Also, we have to increase the capacity of our intelligence gathering so that we can be more proactive in trying to find those weapons as well.
In terms of intelligence, do we have an idea as to how many illegal guns we have on our streets right now?
It would be difficult to say, Tim, but there is too much, too many, if I may say.
But then, to the person who's watching this broadcast right now, who is a law-abiding citizen, who does not have a licensed firearm, how should that person feel? Considering the uncertainty, the fact that we don't know how many illegal guns that are on our streets, and the fact that we know many of those guns are entering through our porous borders, which remain unprotected.
Well, we want to assure persons out there that on a daily basis we are engaged in activities that would lead towards the recovery of those guns. And once we have information, that we will act upon it. Only today, some officers were conducting a search in Vieux-Fort where 2 illegal firearms were recovered. And I must say kudos to those officers and kudos to whoever provided the information, if it was provided by members of the public. So we are, on a daily basis, we are working towards de-gunning the streets, so to speak. But like I said, we need the cooperation of the general public. We need persons to come forward. We need information that we can act upon.
Without the information coming from members of the public, for one reason or the other, do you all act on your own accord? Do you all come up with whatever strategies that are necessary?
We do have other intelligence gathering activities that we conduct, and for security purposes I'm not able to disclose what exactly it is. But more often than not, the information doesn't always come from the public. So we do have our own means of acquiring information that we act upon that lead towards the recovery of illegal firearms. On
an annual basis, how many guns, illegal firearms, you think that you would be, the police would be confiscating in St. Lucia on an average, on an annual basis?
I do not have the exact figures with me now, but it would be in the 20s or 30s.
Is that enough?
It is not enough, Tim, because we know there are more guns out there, but it is a step in the right direction. It is a work in progress, and we are continuing to pursue activities that would lead towards recovery of firearms.
Is it understandable why, for example, a law-abiding citizen, considering what we're hearing with so many people having illegal firearms in their possession, and they're seen as criminal elements, those who are not afraid to use them, to challenge the police and to engage in other criminal acts, including robbery and so on, is it understandable that a law-abiding citizen would want to arm himself or herself, particularly if they do not have much confidence in the police?
You mean to arm themselves in terms of acquiring a licensed firearm?
Illegally.
We would discourage persons from arming themselves illegally. There's a process of applying for a licensed firearm, and we would prefer persons to apply through the legal means and to get the licensed firearm as opposed to getting illegal firearms.
Are there mitigating circumstances or instances where, for example, the courts would be lenient on somebody who does not have a criminal record, but he or she proves that out of fear they armed themselves with an illegal firearm? Not that I'm suggesting that people should, but I'm sure, and let's be realistic, that there are instances where people are arming themselves primarily because they are afraid that there are so many people out there, gangsters, etc., who have illegal firearms. And in the everyday living in St. Lucia, they might want to rob them and so on. And they do not see the police as that buffer between themselves and those criminal elements. And therefore, they go on to arm themselves? Are there mitigating circumstances where, for example, the courts would take that into consideration?
In dispensing justice, the court would take all the circumstances of the case into consideration and would use, the magistrate would use, or the judge would use his discretionary power to dispense justice. But I cannot speak to exactly what is going to happen. It would, I suppose it would happen on a case-by-case basis. But all the circumstances of the case is going to be taken into consideration when judgment is being dispensed.
As a police officer in the execution of your duties, on approaching someone, do you automatically assume, considering everything that you know, assume that they have an illegal firearm in their possession?
One, as a police officer, you must prepare for the worst. So, on approaching that person, you must believe that you will get some form of resistance, and so you must prepare for whatever resistance that you may encounter, so that you can overcome that resistance. So you must always approach cautiously with some degree of readiness that you can overcome whatever resistance.
Then inadvertently, can that also cause the police to overreact?
You see, police officers have to make a decision at the spur of the moment, and sometimes these decisions can go wrong, sometimes they can go right. And hopefully we're hoping that at all times it will go right. But you see, when you're faced with, with adversity, you have to make a split-second decision. And like I said, sometimes you may be wrong, sometimes you may be right.
Are you satisfied with the penalties that are being imposed on persons who are found with illegal firearms?
There are a lot of areas where our laws need to be strengthened, Tim, because the police force is just one arm of the judicial system, and if we have to fight crime and do that effectively, we need all the other sectors in the judicial system to function properly, and that would mean the court, that would mean the other social services, the bodily, and what have you. So each of those entities or sectors have to play their part, and where there are flaws in those systems, it needs to be strengthened. Likewise, the police force. And once you have all those agencies working in tandem, then I think we'll have a better judicial system, and everybody will be satisfied with the way in which crime is being handled or tackled overall.
But considering the peculiar circumstances that we're experiencing right now with regard to gun crimes, are you satisfied with, again, the punishment that is being imposed on people who are found with illegal firearms? Should we leave it as is right now?
Well, the magistrates and the judges can only implore or dispense punishment that are on the law books. They cannot go beyond.
But the police can advise the legislators as to the way forward.
The members of the public
that should be effected.
The members of the public, the media can play that role as well.
Likewise, the police.
Well, all of us can.
So you're still not in a position to say whether you like to see any changes being effected as far as the laws of St. Lucia are concerned with regard to gun crimes.
I would like to see that when penalties are imposed on persons, that it would serve as a deterrent more than anything else, and not just a slap on the wrist. That would serve not really as an encouragement, but that would tell them, I can do that again. So I would prefer that it be stiff enough that it would serve as a deterrent.
But do you think that the police should make its feelings known on this issue directly to our legislators, directly to our policymakers?
I think the police, the media, the general public, everybody have to put a hand where that is concerned. If the laws are inadequate, everybody should, because at the end of the day, the crime affects everybody. It affects everybody. So if the penalties are inadequate, everybody should agitate for stiffer penalties and not just leave it to the police.
We have a backlog of cases right now, and that will include gun crimes. What kind of impact do you think that this is having on your efforts to ensure that those people who are involved in such acts, I'm again referring to people involved in gun crimes, basically are made to feel the full force of the law? Because I imagine that the dispensation of justice, as far as those gun crimes are concerned, because of the backlog of cases, would be delayed. How is that affecting the work of the police?
It is affecting the work of the police to a very good extent. Sometimes you feel your efforts go in vain. But police should not be too concerned. Well, I'm speaking from my personal perspective. I'm not too concerned with the result of a case I'm involved in. Once I have done whatever I need to do and I have placed it before the court, then the rest is up to the court. But obviously the backlog will create some hardship. But I know some efforts are being made. We have employed, the government have employed some more judges to deal with criminal cases, and so there are 4 of them now dealing with criminal cases. But because of the backlog, it will take a while before these cases can be cleared. But hopefully, once work continues in that regard, we will see that justice being dispensed a little swifter.
But why you said that you're not too preoccupied with the outcome of a case that you're involved in? Because, I mean, you're leaving it to the magistrate, you're leaving it to the judges, and so on. You'd have gone through some painstaking effort to ensure that, yes, this is the individual who has been apprehended by you for this particular crime. You would have been certainly being, I'm sure, thorough and careful in terms of ensuring that the evidence would determine the guilt of that person. So then why wouldn't you be concerned with regard to the outcome?
I wouldn't be too concerned about the outcome because I do not want to put my emotions into it, because obviously once you are concerned with the outcome, if for example for whatever technicality you didn't get the desired outcome, you will feel dejected, you will feel that the efforts have gone in vain. But like I said, for me, once I have done everything that I'm supposed to do and I've put the matter before the court, then the rest is out of my hands.
What about if you have to encounter that same individual for a similar crime a few months later? I'm sure that this has happened to you as one who has been in the Royal St. Lucia Police Force over several decades now.
Well, I let bygones be bygones, and I treat each new situation with the peculiar circumstance that it presents itself with.
Police patrols, people are complaining about this. And people are saying that they're not seeing enough police officers on our streets. And I'm sure that many people are talking about the capital in particular, and let's say the south and our towns and so on. How do you respond to this?
We do have police patrols, both uniform and plainclothes. We do joint patrols also with the city police, and we must commend them on trying to improve our efforts in policing the streets. We are faced with manpower constraints, Tim, and we are, as we speak, on a recruitment drive to recruit some police officers so that we can increase our numbers to have more police presence in and around the streets.
How many more police officers are you looking to recruit, and how soon?
Well, I think the vacancy is about 60 or so. I think don't quote me on that one. Like I said, we have put out the notices for persons to apply, and once we receive applications, we will go through the process of the recruitment process.
But we have a situation where so many police officers then are retiring from the force and leaving the force for one reason or the other. And those police officers are not replaced, particularly those who are retiring. Are we back to square one very often? Very often when we recruit, is more replacement than adding to the numbers that we already have. Is there, as far as you're concerned, an eagerness on the part of members of the public, civilians, to become police officers, even despite the challenges that the force would be experiencing right now, and in particular, the battering that its image has had to endure over several decades now? Are people still,
I would say yes,
willing to become police officers?
People are still willing to become police officers. I worked.
Is it just a job for them, or is it just love for policing because of the unemployment situation?
It could be a combination of all these factors. Because I remember working at the Police Training Academy, and when we have applications out for recruitment, if we have 60 vacancies, we would get over 500 or so applicants, and that number.
But isn't indicative of the high unemployment problem that we're experiencing?
Well, like I said, it could be a combination of the high employment. It could be a combination of persons wanting to join. It could be the fact that they see it as a lucrative form of employment. I don't know. It could be a combination of all these factors.
What kind of training is provided to our police right now? Because they are being trained at our local institution at Letok.
Yes.
What level of training you think? Is it sufficient to meet the demands that we're experiencing right now, the challenges?
Our recruitment training program is as good as anywhere in the Caribbean, because I can tell you from my own experience, I was trained in Barbados, and the level of training that we provide here is far superior than what is provided in Barbados now. But training is something that should be ongoing. It is not once you've graduated from training school, that's it. No. Training is ongoing because the dynamics of crime is changing every day. And every time we sort of improve on our training curriculum, we bring in new areas to sort of keep abreast with what's happening in society.
Are we impacted again by impacts and the Americans withdrawing their training to our police officers?
Obviously, whatever training we used to get from the Americans, we don't get it anymore.
You have a new source?
But we have, well, the Americans were not the only ones providing training. We had RSS, who still continue to provide us with training. We have CFAD, who still continue to provide us with training. But what is also interesting, Tim, even before impacts and before the American withdrawal, we had officers who were trained by the Americans, and these officers are still in the force. So we should be using these officers, although we do it sometimes, to provide in-service training to those who were not fortunate enough to get a training from them. So to me, we should be doing it more consistently, because training is something that should always be ongoing. But training, once you receive it, at some point in time is going to become obsolete. So you need to refresh, and the fact that we don't have it anymore, we can only go up to a certain level.
But how many police officers make the personal sacrifice and use their own financial resources to hone their skills and to better themselves?
Quite a bit of officers pursue training in various technical areas and also in the academia. And this is something that we encourage.
I think that there's talk about a female police officer as well qualified. I can't remember at what level. Just recently we had it in the news, I think a few months ago.
I'm not sure if you're referring to Ms. Siri. She just acquired her doctorate,
yes.
I think, in business management. Yeah, so we have officers who pursue various levels of academia on a daily basis. And this is something that we encourage very much.
We civilians normally hear that there are factions in the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, etc., that are preventing the police officer from, the force from performing at an optimum level. Is the police force settled right now under its police commissioner, Mr. Sarah Mosheri?
I would say yes, it is settled, and I think the police force has been settled for a while. I mean, once you deal with human beings, there will be disagreements, there will be, but people can agree to disagree, but at the end of the day, you must come together, work together, because we have an objective to achieve, and we must come together and achieve the objective. So I would say yes, we settled, we working together, and we would like to do that more and more. We will work towards achieving a better cohesive organization, but we're managing with the way it is.
How has the fact that we have our National Security Minister, Minister for Home Affairs, who is himself a former Deputy Police Commissioner, helped in terms of assistance being provided to the Royal St. Lucia Police Force?
Well, the fact that he was in the organization, he would know the organization in and out. He would know the the needs of the organization. He would know where we are lacking, and he would try and agitate on our behalf.
Do you think the force has benefited from this, from Mr. Herman Gill Francis serving as Home Affairs Minister, Minister of National Security?
You see, sometimes you will not see the result of efforts overnight. Sometimes it takes a little while, and he's been there, what, about a year or over a year now. So while we are seeing certain improvement in certain areas, we're hoping that that trend will continue, and we'll see better things in the years to come.
You're watching Newsmaker Live on DBS Television. My guest is Police Superintendent Mr. George Nicholas. When we come back, your calls. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. We'll put a telephone number on screen right now so that you can call with your questions and comments for my guest. Once again, he is Police Superintendent Mr. George Nicholas of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. And we're focusing on the crime situation or the crime problem currently plaguing the island. We have so far registered some 37 homicides for this year, 2017. We have a caller line. Good evening. Go ahead with your contribution, caller.
Good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. To the Commissioner, I am asking, do you think there are people out there who are more...
Can you speak up, please? We could hardly hear you.
You were saying, I'm saying, don't you think there are many people out there that are much better to perform police duties than most of the officers out there? Because there are some people who don't have the academic resource to perform duties, and that would avoid them from being a part of the force. But is there anything in place for people who don't have that academic people to be in the force?
Okay.
Anything measure in place for those people to be able to have access to being a part of the force because of your love for the job?
Thank you so much. You got a gist of the question?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, please. Thank you.
I would say yes. We have persons out there who may not have the benchmark qualification to become a police officer, and who, if given a chance, can become very good police officers. But you see, we have a recruitment policy, and it requires one to have a certain benchmark in order to be eligible to join the police force. And but one can serve in other areas. We have auxiliary agencies that one can opt to serve to assist the police.
We continue to take your calls. Once again, this is Newsmaker Live. Hello, good evening. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening to you, Tim.
Hi, good evening to you, sir.
And good evening to your guest.
Yes, good evening, sir.
You know, I like the forthrightness with which Superintendent Nicholas has been responding to the questions that you've been asking him, Tim. Now, Superintendent Nicholas, you said earlier on that out of the 37 homicides that have been committed this year, that 22 of them have been resolved. Now, I know when you're talking about having resolved these crimes, that what you're talking about is having arrested someone and having charged someone, but not necessarily having successfully prosecuted these individuals. Now, I'm sure there are similar cases where you have resolved such crimes, like, for example, last year or even the year before. Now, I think Tim asked you a question in that regard earlier on. You find that the wheels of justice are turning very slowly in this country, and not only here. Just recently I had the Barbados Prime Minister making the same complaint that when cases are brought before the courts, they take eons before they can be heard. Now, I know that sometimes that can be very frustrating for police officers, because sometimes these very same individuals who engage in these criminal activities find themselves back on the streets, you know, perhaps out on bail and perhaps committing more crime. Sometimes they themselves become victims of crime themselves. You know, so I'd like to know what it is that you think can be done in order to improve the length of time that it takes for these cases, you know, to go before the court. Sometimes, you know, it might be the lawyers, these individuals, the lawyers' fault that the case is not heard. Sometimes it could be the prosecution, you know, that is not ready, that the case is not heard. and sometimes it might be the judge's fault or the magistrate's fault. So I believe that these entities should come together and see to it. You know, I heard the Minister for National Security saying that he's trying to enact a time frame within which these cases can be heard. And I think that is the way to go, because I think that is impeding the work of the police. Because if you are pursuing individuals engaged in criminal activity, arresting them, charging them, and yet still, you know, I mean, they cannot find that day in court, I mean, it really makes no sense. Now, with regards to training of police officers, I heard you said that a lady did an MBA recently. Now, I know I have been made to understand that since the sanctions that have been placed on the police by the Americans, that no police officer can attend any learning institution in the United States where the whatever it is that they're pursuing has to do with policing. Can you tell me whether it's true or not? Because I understand there's an individual who wanted to, you know, pursue, you know, a certain area of policing in the U.S. out of pocket, and he was not allowed to. Can you speak to that, please?
Thank you so much for calling, sir.
Yeah. I know. Thank you very much, caller, for your comments. Yes, the U.S. have withdrawn training from the Royal Central Police Force. Any training that U.S. sponsored, we cannot attend as a member of the police force. But as an individual, if you're pursuing studies in a U.S. college or U.S. university, I don't see any difficulty in you pursuing your studies there. But once you're representing the Royal Central Police Force and it is a U.S. sponsored training, you wouldn't be allowed to attend. And just to respond to his first comment, I know he spoke about what can be done to sort of expedite the process of having those matters. Once the police have put the matter before the court, it is out of our hands, and matters get delayed through a number of reasons. Sometimes, for whatever reason, the DPP's office is not ready. Sometimes lawyers don't show up. So it can be delayed for a number of reasons. But once we have the what you call the criminal procedure rules, and it stipulates, I think it's about 180 days. Once a matter is before the court, it must start within those 180 days.
I think we have another caller line. Hello, good evening. Go ahead, please. Thank you so much for holding on, caller.
Good evening, Timothy and your guest.
Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
I must say, hat off to your guest, the way he handled himself within the question you have been asking him so far. One question that you asked him, whether that police have their own strategy in terms of fighting crime, and which he answered by telling you, yes, they do. But it's not all the strategies they will make known to the public, and I find this was very commendable. Yeah, but two concerns I have is one, reporting matters to the police, and we have been seeing SSU officers and police on beat, and you see them guys walking opposite each other, and the back is exposed to whoever. They don't have no protection within the back, which I find that it should be the other way around. They should be standing up or walking back to back. You know, not opposite each other. That's one. The first one is, when you go and make a report to the police, you observe something negative about to take place. They are asking you so much question that they are causing you to what I'm looking for, to have a friction, to create a friction within yourself, as though you are guilty. You are guilty of the report you're making. Asking you your ID card, asking you your date of birth, asking you where you reside, and all kind of that. And which I find that is totally wrong. So in that regard, you find the public being very reluctant to report matters to the police. What's your say, sir?
Thank you so much for calling.
When a report is being made, we have to enter the report in a computer system, and we require certain information to be entered so that we can probably carry out a thorough investigation into that matter. So there are times when people will feel that the information is irrelevant, but it is relevant because we need to populate the system with the information so that we can carry out our investigation.
But do you think that's the measures being employed? Why not take it from the approach of dealing, giving priority to the urgent area, what the person might consider to be something that is quite urgent or important to them? Deal with it as quickly as possible and then move on to the other areas, such as name and other material.
I quite agree, and that is where supervision comes in. The supervisor should, prioritize or see what is needed at the time to deal with it and then move on.
I'm told we have another call. Good evening. Go ahead, please.
Hello. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening to you, sir.
Yes, I am not a police officer. I am not into any aspect of law enforcement. But I believe I can give a simple suggestion to the crime situation we have in St. Lucia. I mean, the majority of crimes, is at gang levels in St. Lucia, especially in the area of Castries. Just, I think, day before yesterday, we had an incident where we had a shooting at Bocage. That is just a place where, just actually this year, there are some boys that have started liming there, loitering around the place. And look, we had a shooting there not too long ago. So what I can suggest, the same way you need a plan or you need to register a business, I believe that the gangs as well should be registered. They should go to the police if they want to have a place for them to loiter around and bring their ID cards and everything. So the police know exactly all the members of this gang. If they cannot comply with these certain standards, I don't believe any gang should be formed in St. Lucia. The police should be, to me, more on the lookout for this. You see 1, 2 guys by the road, that's how the gangs start. Break up these guys. Once it's more than 2, it's a gang as far as I can see. These things should be broken up immediately. These things form as small and then grow up and then it becomes a problem. And as far as I can see, no gang should be nowhere close to the road. All gangs should be about maybe 50 feet to 100 feet away from the main government road. This place is, that is horrible in the country. Everywhere you pass, you will see a group of boys just sitting down, smoking, selling job, and the job is obviously to rob marijuana. So the marijuana doesn't be very far sometimes. It's very close, somewhere close to where they are. Just the same area in Bocage where they're shooting, there is a school right above. Okay, and then that's where the school train passed down, and these boys are just there sitting down from 6 o'clock in the morning until way hours in the night. That is one of the biggest problems I see in St. Lucia. The gangs. There should be breaking up gangs in St. Lucia. Once you are by the road, send you at your home. The police pass back, you're still there, pick you up, lock you up for 72 hours, and do that every single day. I have a place under my house I could also rent for the officers so if they want to keep these guys there as far as I can see. Thank you, Mr. Polio, and thank you, officer.
Thank you so much for
your comment.
What say you, sir?
Once, and that is where we need members of the public to assist. Once they notice something is beginning to bud, provide us with the information, and if we can intervene at the early stage, it wouldn't develop. Because once something, which is a stage where it has to come to the police, it has gone out of proportion already. It's crisis proportion.
Another call. Good evening. Go ahead, please, with your contribution.
Good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Okay, concerning policing traffic, I realize there's not much patrol in traffic. Because I do taxi driving, and most times when I drive the tourists around, they're asking me, where is the police? They will do a whole tour, and they will not even see one police present. I think that is not good enough. Even on the main highway, Castries with Rosalie, there's an accident, and it takes so long to come and for the police to get there because there's no police present. I think to the superintendent, let me see if I can just pose a little advice. I think you have motorcycle police officers. You could have at least one of them, two of them patrolling the highway, making sure that traffic flows well, anything that's wrong on traffic. But you don't see no police presence at all. And I don't think that's good enough.
Thank you so much for calling, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, the traffic department is an area where we are receiving a lot of complaints from, and it is an area that we are putting a lot of emphasis on. Only yesterday at our executive meeting, it came up again, and it is an area that we are going to be focusing on as we speak, and we're going to be injecting some more resources into the traffic department so that we can try and provide a better service on the roads.
Producer, do we have another call in line? Hi. Okay, we lost the call. But continue to call us once again for my guest on this program. He is Police Superintendent Mr. George Nicholas. Good evening. Go ahead, please. Hello? Okay. Can you take your... Okay, let's cut off the call. But please, as usual, let me implore you, if you're going to call this broadcast, turn down the volume of your television set before you do so, because terrible feedback would normally affect the quality of the broadcast. And we go up until 10 o'clock this evening, so we have about 15 minutes left on the program Newsmaker Live right here on DBS Television. Let's see if we have another call. Okay, we lost that call as well. But with regard to the gangs, you said earlier on, sir, that when those problems are mushrooming, you see people assembling along the street corners and so on, that people should call the police. But very often people tell you that the police do not respond to those concerns coming from members of the public.
You see, sometimes the police, again, because of our limited resources, both manpower and machinery, we cannot respond at the time that they want us to respond. And sometimes we are attending to a more urgent call. But that should not prevent persons from continuing to call the police. Just be persistent. Just call and call and call. We will respond once we are able to respond. As much as possible, we would like to respond immediately. But because of resource constraints and so many things happening now, we have to give priority to more serious offenses than the minor ones.
Okay, but I think there's a law against gangs, as far as I'm aware.
We have an anti-gang legislation that I think it requires some amendments, some work to be done on it as we speak. So it is not something that is being more or less enforced as we speak, because it needs to be sorted out.
But do you think that's something that should be given priority at this time, considering the problems that we're experiencing with gang-related problems we're experiencing in St. Lucia right now?
There are lots of areas that needs
but this one in particular?
And this one would be one of those that would require some priority.
What about the police working in collaboration with security personnel? We'll focus on this in just a moment as we have a call. Good evening, you're on the air.
Yes, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Yeah, just well, I have two concerns. The first involves when civilians apply for firearm licenses. If their application is not approved, they just get a letter from the commissioner saying the application is not approved, but no explanation is given as to why the application is not approved. I think that sort of response from the police is kind of inappropriate in the 21st century. It gives the impression that the police, are arrogant and aloof. Yeah, and the second issue is I think the police need to improve their telecommunications capacity in light of climate change and the fact that we have these very active hurricane seasons. What if, God forbid, if St. Lucia was impacted by a major hurricane and we lost our normal cell phone communication to the other islands? Would the police have a backup system to alert, our neighbors that we need help? Look what happened in Barbuda. I'm sure there's a police station, but for several hours, no one really knew what happened to Barbuda. So I think that in St. Lucia we need to improve our telecommunications, particularly to support policing.
Thank you so much for calling, sir. What's
yes, that is another area that we're working to improve upon our communication system. It is really bad, and I know there are proposals that have been put forward in order to get that aspect of our tools up and running.
The initial issue about persons applying for licenses, but we'll turn our attention to it in just a moment. But let's give priority to the call. Good evening, you're on the air.
Yeah, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
Yeah, just good evening to the police officer also.
Good evening to you, caller.
Sorry about that. Pretty much, I just want to ask the representative for the Royal St. Lucia Police Force a couple of questions. One would be, wouldn't you think that the crime starts off with the police in particular? When I say the crime starts off with the police in particular, what has the Royal St. Lucia Police Force put in place when it comes to communication skills with citizens to train their police officers? Because I'll be honest with you, half of the police officers, well, not half, I will say 95% of the police officers don't know how to communicate when it comes to dealing with their job. That's one. Two, discipline. A lot of these police officers stop people and charge them for seat belts. But when you passing them in the vehicles, not one of them have their seat belts on. Three, another thing would be a lot of these police officers hold personal vendettas against citizens. Regardless of whatever situation they might have with them, they target them. So basically, this is all I just want to find out. What have you all put in place when it comes to communication skills for your police officers and disciplining them on a regular basis? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for calling.
As it relates to communication skills, this is one area that we have incorporated in our training curriculum. It was not there initially, but it has been incorporated. It's quite some time now. Customer service is another one. But you see, training is something that should be ongoing. It's not training today and then you forget about it. Training has to be ongoing. And as it relates to the wearing of seat belts, police officers are subject to the same law that we enforce, and we are supposed to abide by those very rules that we enforce. So once persons see police officers breaking the laws, they ought to report the police officers. And we have a disciplinary system within the organization that works. It works.
A previous caller did pose a question with regard to... Okay, we have a call. Good evening. Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Good evening to you.
Hi, good evening to you.
How are you doing?
All right.
Good evening, Superintendent.
Good evening, sir.
First of all, let me start with giving kudos, because number one, not everybody can be a police officer. It is a very tough job, especially in the island of St. Lucia. When you look at criticism, when you look at what the police actions are, there's always going to be scrutiny, an eye over the police and how they conduct themselves, no question about it. But to the officer who was on vacation and who reacted, that is in line with what is considered to be policing. You're there to serve and protect. And given the odds and putting himself out in such a position and trying to, of course, stand to that oath of being a police officer, kudos to him. The areas that need to be improved. Tim, again, thanks to your show, I've learned that there are 21 or 22 murders solved. Am I correct to say?
Yeah, according to the 22.
22. How good is the website of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force with information to the general public? So for say you don't have the PR all the time to state, or whether it is gazetted, what takes place in a sense, or I think there must be a way of getting information out to the public, which will satisfy the public that things are being done. Recently I saw information placed on an open chat, which mentioned officers' names and badge numbers, and or if not their names, yes, I think both, and their numbers and so on. And it could not have come from a civilian. I don't think so. And if so, it would be a sad story to see a civilian putting out such information. But if more Also, it came from an officer in an open chat, revealing or divulging such information. It goes back to how people believe, and I say believe, the police are open to putting out, who's helping them or what the case may be. So the police force itself has a job to do to reassure the general public, because once the assurance is there, the general public, no question about it, in my mind, will be more than happy to assist, because it affects him or her in one way or the other. But again, kudos. Your commissioner is back. It's good to hear that he had something to say. And he spoke about intervention for the youth. And that is another area that not so much the police cannot be everywhere, but we as St. Lucians have to look at what is happening from a sporting standpoint, what is happening in the schools, because I've always said sports is another way out. And the more idle hands you have sitting around, the more the devil works, put it at that. And we have to engage our youth in early preschool, primary school, what the case may be, to mold our youth into proud citizens. So again, kudos to the police force. Keep doing what you guys are doing. It's a tough job. But as a graduate of the Leon Hess Secondary School like yourself, it's good to see persons like you out there making a name. Have a blessed one.
Thanks so much for calling, sir.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Okay, the earlier point was made by the caller with regard to the issuance of licenses to carry a firearm, and when it's not done, the process, how the police would be informing those applicants. Okay,
there's a process in terms of for one to apply for a licensed firearm. And the Firearms Act makes provision for that thing. I would think, I'm not sure whether the law provides an explanation to the person, but I would think, knowing the commissioner that we have, he being the ultimate authority, I think he would apply the law to the letter. If it does not require an explanation, I don't think he would provide one. If it requires one, I think he would provide one.
Let's take our final call. Good evening, Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Yes, good evening, Tim. Good evening to your guest.
Good evening to you.
Sir. Good evening.
Tim, I often wonder why we have 9 to 5 police.
Okay, caller, there's a feedback. Your television set is on.
Oh, okay.
Can you turn it down, please? Turn on the volume, and then you can continue your contribution.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I often wonder why we have 9 to 5 police. Because I live in the United States, and if you break the law, especially in traffic, you see a police come from nowhere, and then he takes you on. But from 4 o'clock, there's no police on the road. I want the officer to explain that to me.
Okay. He'll explain so you could listen on television set right now. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for calling, sir.
What I can tell you, sir, we have 24/7 police and not 9 to 5. As a matter of fact, we used to have some outstations that used to close at midnight or 1 o'clock at different times. But now, as much as possible, we have those police stations open around the clock. So I don't also know where the 9 to 5 police is coming from. I mean, we police around the clock.
Final comments from you, sir.
I just want to, well, first I want to thank you for the opportunity, Tim, to be on the show, to share with the general public. I want to reassure St. Lucians that the Royal St. Lucia Police Force is committed to fighting crime in St. Lucia, but we cannot do it alone. We are soliciting the continued assistance from members of the public. We are very thankful for the assistance that has been provided so far and the support, and we are looking forward to continued support to achieve our objectives.
Mr. George Nicholas, thank you so much for being my guest on this evening's Newsmaker Live. Superintendent George Nicholas of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. If it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live. Stand by now for the clip that peaked. Once again, that's the broadcast. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Timothy Paulion, wishing you a very good evening. See you next time.